So, Fright Night came out in 1985. Now, when you think of 80s movies, coming of age, vampires, pretty cool soundtrack, rock music, that kind of thing, you do think of The Lost Boys, and I think that's fair because that film probably overshadowed this. It is the better of the two, but that's a very high standard. Lost Boys is a really good film. Fright Night is very good as well. If you've not seen it, check it out. I'm going to get into specifics of it, what happens in the film. But from a general thematic point of view, this film does kind of pay homage to a lot of the films of the previous decades prior to this coming out. So things like Hammer horror movies, which were maybe sort of getting to be about 20 to 30 years old at the time, I think. Maybe just 20 years old, maybe not that far back. So they weren't that old, this was 1985. It also kind of pays homage to Alfred Hitchcock movies such as Rear Window as well. You can definitely see some of the nods to, like I say, Hammer horror and Alfred Hitchcock in this, sometimes directly, sometimes just in a basic theme. But it does a really good job because it brings everything up to date and it is its own thing. It's very memorable. The actors in this, like I say, Chris Sarandon, who plays the head vampire, he's very memorable. You'll have seen him in things like The Princess Bride, in case you're wondering where you recognise him from. He was also in Dog Day Afternoon. There's also a great cast. Amanda Bierce, who was in Married with Children, Roddy McDowall, who's Roddy McDowall. But yeah, really good film. One thing I will say about this movie as well, the soundtrack is excellent. As I mentioned that at the beginning of this video. It's very 80s. It's got a bit of rock music. The score was done by Brad Fiedel. Now, this that I've got here, the record, isn't the score, it's just the normal soundtrack, but you can get the score separately. Brad Fiedel did do one of the tracks on here, and he was famous for doing Terminator. But anyway, not the soundtrack, we're going to talk about the movie now. So, 1985 saw the release of Fright Night, as I say, and as I was mentioning, it does get compared to The Lost Boys as kind of being the inferior of the two. And I wouldn't put it that way at all. I mean, it's not as good, but I wouldn't kind of frame it in that sense because I think Lost Boys has a lot of advantages because it had a more memorable cast. You had Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland, a lot of other familiar faces in that movie as well. Fright Night might have, at the time, obviously Roddy McDowall and so on, but I don't think he was as recognisable 10 years later, whereas people like Kiefer Sutherland and so on, they went on and kind of grew from there. But not saying there's anything wrong with the cast in this film. It's really, I mean, it's very good, to be honest. Just the main villain, played by Chris Sarandon alone, he's really good in this. He's really kind of menacing, but in a kind of humorous way as well. He's really enjoying playing it as well. From what I understand, he didn't actually want to be in this movie because of the kind of state where horror movies were in at the time. Wasn't for him. I mean, there were a lot of good horror movies, to be fair, at the time. But like I think it was more like slashers and so on, like Friday the 13th and all that. But when he read the script, apparently he really liked it, and you can see why it would appeal to somebody like him. But as I say, it's an unfair comparison to make. I wouldn't compare it to this. I would say the two complement each other. I don't mean to sound pretentious, but that's the best way I can put it. A very similar dynamic actually exists as well in three movies that aren't vampire movies, they are werewolf movies. And that would be, in fact, all these came out in the same year, so these definitely get compared. American Werewolf in London, The Howling, and Wolfen. Although Wolfen isn't werewolves as such, it's more wolves, but whatever. These three films do get compared to each other a lot, but I don't look at it that way. I look at the three kind of being almost like a spiritual trilogy, even though there's no real connection between them other than what they're about. There's some connections as to some of the people who are making the movies kind of jumped ship in some cases, so there was some connection, but that's a bit of a stretch to say that these movies are actually connected. But each film is very different to the others. I mean, Wolfen is kind of like a cop thing in New York, and it's about wolves. American Werewolf in London is a bit more comedic, and The Howling is more sort of chilling kind of thing. So similar dynamic, like I say, to what you get with The Lost Boys and Fright Night. I feel like I'm talking about everything other than Fright Night now. So let's get into what it's about, because I haven't really said. If you haven't seen this movie, give it a watch. I'm going to kind of cover a little bit. I'll try to avoid like major spoilers, because there's some things in this where there's a little bit of a sleight of hand, so I won't give too much of it. But if you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about anyway. This is just, you can listen to my opinion. So basically, like I was saying, it lends from films like Rear Window, because you've got this character, Charlie Brewster, played by Michael Ragsdale. And I've just got IMDb here just so I can have the names down. And he's a kid, basically. He's a teenager. He lives with his mum, and he's got a girlfriend played by Amanda Bierce, who was in Married with Children. This was just before she did that. And Charlie thinks he's seen a murder happening across the street, or next door actually, that was carried out by his neighbour, played by Chris Sarandon, the head vampire. So it's not just a murder that he thinks he saw. I think he actually saw, because he sees the nails and he sees the fangs and everything through the windows. He's attacking this woman, and he also sees a coffin as well, kind of being sort of brought up the driveway. So he definitely thinks that this is a vampire attack. Nobody believes him. His friends don't believe him. His mum doesn't believe him. Even the police, when he gets them involved, they don't believe him either. So they all try to clear this up. They go around to the house. The head vampire lives with another guy. They've just moved in, and they're very kind of smooth talking. They manage to convince the cop that it's a load of rubbish. So he's at a bit of a wit's end, is this kid, Charlie Brewster. And like I say, even his girlfriend doesn't believe him. His best friend doesn't believe him. So what he does is, he watches this TV show that's on late night, and there's a TV show host who presents horror movies, and I think it's filmed locally as well as this show. And the host of that is played by Roddy McDowall, and he plays a character called Peter Vincent, which is a nod to Peter Cushing and Vincent Price, who were in a lot of horror movies. So again, it's little things like that do. There's very purposeful nods there to what came before. So he goes to him for help, because obviously this guy knows about vampires because he's made movies about it. He presents movies about it as well. But he's a washed up actor anyway. He doesn't believe him either. So there's a lot of backwards and forwards. They go to the house of the vampire with his friends. Peter Vincent, played by Roddy McDowall, goes with them as well. And nobody believes him. But then Peter Vincent has his mirror that he uses in his movies to see whether somebody's a vampire, because they don't have a reflection, and the guy doesn't have a reflection, and he's kind of like, he freezes up and he just kind of like quietly leaves. And then when they're outside the house, he's like, that guy didn't have a reflection, I'm out of here, fuck this. But he stays in the movie. They have a lot of other stuff that happens. Like I say, if I go any further, I'm going to get into major spoilers, but it results in the kid's girlfriend gets bitten, she transforms. That's what that is on the front of the poster. Interesting, there's a sequel as well. They actually used the same poster for the sequel as well. I'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, that's the gist of it anyway. There's a lot of comedy in this. It's not a comedy movie, but it is. It's got an angle to it. Like you had Beverly Hills Cop, that was kind of an action movie, but at the same time it was a comedy. But it wasn't the comedy in and of itself, or maybe it was. But it just really does fit well in the 80s. Those kind of movies, like I say, if you're into that kind of thing, definitely watch this, because this is up there. I don't think it's as regarded as a classic as many others, but to people that do love this, Fright Night is usually one that gets referred to a lot. Now, the Blu-ray of this came out by Eureka, and that's one of the companies like Arrow Video that do a lot of really good presentations. I think you get the DVD with this as well as the Blu-ray. You don't really get that a lot nowadays. Really nice presentation they put together. The quality of the movie is very good. Obviously, it's Blu-ray. You would expect that anyway, but it was a really clean version of this. There's a lot of extras as well. I'll just see if I can get that in focus. Maybe I can, maybe I can't, but yeah, it's a little bit better. But you can see what the extras are on there as well. I'll just check it out, whatever. You can see that online. The second movie isn't as good, it has to be said. It's a little bit of a letdown. It does have William Ragsdale, who plays Charlie, the main kid, and Roddy McDowall, who plays Peter Vincent. They return in this, which is great, because they were two very good characters from the first film. But none of the others really return. And the second one is about, not the sister, it's the cousin of the Chris Sarandon vampire from the first film, and she's basically out for revenge. It's got its good moments. Don't get me wrong. I would say watch it, but it's a bit of a letdown if you watch the first one and then the second one because you're ending on a not as good note. But the second one was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who went on to direct Stephen King's It. He tends to have done a lot of these films. He tends to have picked up, or maybe in his earlier parts of his career, he picked up a lot of movies, sequels that the original director didn't come back to. So he did Halloween 3, for example, which I talked about last year on the channel. So again, another movie that's not as good as the originals. But Tom Holland, the director, not the guy that plays Spider-Man, he directed the original Fright Night. And I think he'd done the original Child's Play movie as well, from memory, as well as a few others. But that's the second film. There's a remake as well, and I would recommend watching it, I would say. It's basically, well, it came out in 2012, so it's about 27 years after the original one. And the cast in this is very good as well. You've got, well, if you're a fan of David Tennant, basically, I mean, he doesn't come into it until much later in the film, but he plays the character that Roddy McDowall played in the original. It's a bit more updated, a bit more contemporary in that sense. The main vampire in this is played by, I always get his name wrong, Colin Farrell. I don't know why I get his name wrong. He's been in loads of stuff, but he's the main vampire in this. He's a bit different to the Chris Sarandon character from the first one. He's a bit more. I don't mean to sound gay, but he's more of a sort of sexy villain. Again, that's not like my opinion saying he's sexy. I'm just saying he's more seductive. Let's just put it that way. Because I think that's one thing about the original movie that was a bit creepy. Well, it was creepy anyway because the guy was a vampire. But the Chris Sarandon vampire, when he's turning Charlie's girlfriend into a vampire and he's dancing with her and they're like loving it kind of thing. It does get a little bit creepy because you've got like older man, younger girl, which in and of itself isn't creepy. I mean, I think older men can totally be with younger lasses as long as it's legal. But you kind of buy it more in the remake because Colin Farrell is a lot more seductive. He's built like a brick shit house. He's just a lot cooler. Not to take anything away from Chris Sarandon, he was really cool as well, but in a very different way. And obviously Anton Yelchin is the main guy in this. He's the kid that Michael Ragsdale played. Very sad with him because he passed away a few years ago, about 5 years ago, in an accident. I think he got crushed by a car or something on a driveway. And he was a really good actor. I was a fan of Anton Yelchin long before it was cool to be a fan of his, because when he was a kid, I remember he was in like an episode of ER and he was really creepy in that. His acting was really creepy. And he was in Stephen King's miniseries Taken as well. And he was really good in that, and Alpha Dog as well. So when he started doing other films like Terminator Salvation and Star Trek and then this, he really had a good career in front of him. But yeah, he died really sadly, and he's very good in it, very good in this as well. I'm not just saying that because he's dead. Like I say, I was a fan of his even before he passed away. But yeah, it's a good remake. A lot of people slag it off. That if you're watching this in America, that means they slate it. But I enjoyed it for what it is. It's not trying to be the first one too much. I mean, it is because it's a remake, but kind of not at face value, I suppose it is. But it does its own thing. And even if you've not seen the original, you could still watch the remake and just enjoy it as any other new movie. So I quite like that. And there was also another film. It wasn't about vampires, and I suppose he's more lending to the Rear Window aspect. But there was also Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf as well. If you like Fright Night, maybe give that a watch. It's not about vampires; it's about serial killers, and it's maybe more lending from Rear Window than it is Fright Night. But it's a young guy, whereas Rear Window is an older man. So I don't know. Maybe it is a bit more like Fright Night. But yeah, what else can I say? Really, it's a very enjoyable movie. Overshadowed, unfortunately, by The Lost Boys. But again, just because you've seen one doesn't mean you can't watch the other. You don't have to look at it from a point of view as these are competing against each other and, oh, well, I'll just stick with that one and ignore the other one. They complement each other. The Lost Boys was a very modern film at the time, whereas Fright Night really does have one foot in the past. So previous decades, 60s and 70s horror movies, and it brings it into the 80s, the modern day at the time anyway. Seems a bit dated now when you watch it, but I think that's a great thing because it was escapism at the time. It's definitely escapism now because you're kind of watching this and going back to the 80s when you're watching it, and you can kind of indulge yourself in all that. One thing that this movie did inspire me with as well, I've got it, you can't see it because the lighting it's obliterated. I've got a Coors Light sign up here, and in the movie, the Charlie character has a Coors Light beer sign in his bedroom as well. So when I was getting one, I thought, I know what I want, I know what kind I want, because it's a bit of a Fright Night reference as well. So I was really chuffed. Those things don't last very long, by the way. They say like 3 to 5 years. The last one I had before that lasted me about 2 years. So I got a lot of use out of it. But yeah, like I say, little things like that. That's what I mean. This movie just kind of it leaves a bit an impression on you that you'll remember. It's a memorable film as well, because you watch a lot of these 80s films. Sometimes you're disappointed when it's one that you've not seen but you've heard about before. Everybody's saying, "Oh, you've got to watch whatever." Sometimes you can be a little bit disappointed with some of them, but Fright Night isn't one of them. So I say give it a watch. Anyway, probably rambling on a bit long now, so come back tomorrow night, because tomorrow obviously is Halloween itself, and we're actually going to have 2 videos. I'm going to be doing a review by myself. I'll probably drop that around about... I'm going to drop that a bit earlier because it's been 7 o'clock every night. We'll drop that at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, Halloween, and then at 7 p.m, the usual schedule time, there's going to be our final video, and I say our because the core is going to be in that one as well. And this one is going to be a good one. We're sticking with 80s horror for this one. That's not in the theme for all the videos this year, but that was the theme last year, and we've kind of carried on a little bit, but not as heavily. But Halloween Night's video itself is as 80s as it gets. I'm not telling you what it is, but you're going to enjoy it, hopefully. So come back, Brand X Reviews, and like I say, I hope you've been enjoying these videos so far, and I hope you enjoy the next couple that we've got coming up for you. Thank you very much for watching.